Are you guys able to see my screen online? Okay, cool. Brilliant. All right. So, a little bit about myself. My name is AJ Green. I'm the CEO and founder of AI Advantage Agency. And essentially what we do in a nutshell is we create custom generative AI software, and we do AI business consulting for startups and small businesses. We got into business over the last 12 months, and in the last 12 months, we were able to partner with over 300 companies that are local to the West Coast. And we continue to lead our local community in innovation and the technological advancement of AI, which I'll tell you guys all about in just a little bit of time. A little bit about my backstory. For those of you who haven't met before, you have had a little bit of sneak peek into it, but I actually wasn't even in AI until 2 years ago. Up until 2022, I was sponsored athlete, fitness director, and I'd actually grown up thinking that fitness was going to be my life forever. It was what I was extremely passionate about. I worked in the decade for over 10 years. And once GPT came out, and I remember the exact date on 11/22, I remember GPT came out live to the world, and it totally turned my world upside down. And just like many of you guys in this room, I was really curious about AI. I knew that there was a lot of potential to be had inside the space. I didn't quite know what it is I was looking at, but I knew that, okay, there's something that's happening here. Since that day, I have moved forward in AI, obviously to be in front of you guys today, but there's three things that I think that really stuck out to me about the technology. So number one was NLP. For those of you that are AI savvy, we know that NLP basically means natural language programming, which essentially allows us to communicate with machines. So if we were to go back and have this conversation, say 10 years ago, and I talked about communicating with machines, people would look at me like I'm crazy unless I was speaking HTML or Java or Python or C++, all of the coding languages. So one thing that I think makes AI very unique, particularly in generative AI, is the fact that you can conversate just like you would with a friend or a peer or a loved one. So that was something that immediately grabbed my attention. The second thing was the fact that people were putting AI out for free. And I myself have put out a lot of free AI products. I'm a big believer in accessibility to AI. If we same thing, if we were to have this conversation 10 years ago, it would cost millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to create some of the solutions that now we can create in a matter of 30 minutes. And I think that's a pretty crazy thing to wrap your head around, but that was one of the main things that stuck out to me. And the last bit was the fact that it's open sourced, right? Like we said, it doesn't cost all this money in R&D to be able to have this amazing technology or to be able to innovate with it. It's consumer friendly and it kind of meets you where you're at. So those are the things that initially stuck out to me about AI, and that I thought to myself, there might be potential in this field. Moving forwards, I, just like many of you guys, I'm sure, started experimenting with AI. I just went on to ChatGPT. I would ask it random questions. I think the first question that I ever asked it was, hey, AI, can you please teach me about AI? And then I just let it go from there. So after I went through my AI curiosity phase, which is I was experimenting as much as possible. I was trying to learn kind of the capabilities and limitations of what this technology has to offer. I knew to myself, okay, I need to go through the path of education because, like I said, there's something here, but I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. So I went to some of the top organizations that are in the world, such as like Harvard, IBM, Meta, Google, the people that are really leading the space in AI. And I went through about like 16 different courses over 6 months. So I was basically just trying to learn as much as I could as quickly as possible, because I know there have been people in the space that had the academic background that I had to compete with. So I dove into it head first. I also wanted to seek out mentors because one thing that was really important to me was it's great to have the education of AI. It's also great to know who to turn to and when to ask questions. So I turned to some people that, fortunately for us, are local to the city of Portland. So shout out to Rick Tursky or Yosef or Andrew N. And some of these people are local to Portland, and they're also some of the biggest names in the AI space, Andrew being top dog, obviously. But most importantly, I felt that through this entire process, I wanted to not only experiment as a consumer or a user, I started to experiment as a creator. So after getting my certifications, I went to go get certified through GPT Developer, started help developing their platform for the OpenAI store, which now has turned into one of the greatest feats that OpenAI has ever accomplished. So that's a little bit about how I went from somebody who was just interested and very curious into becoming educated and trying to get a better picture of what it is I want to do. And then bring me to the jobs. Because obviously having an interest is great, but how are we going to monetize it and how are we going to optimize it to the best of our workflow? So, and I always start out with some base level stats because I'm not quite sure how people are advanced in AI. So I like kind of starting with blanket statements, kind of generalize, and then work our way in more niche over time. So it's very safe to say that AI is the largest industry, like largest growing industry in the world. And we can see that, and I'll show you guys a bunch of graphs to support a bunch of data because I'm a very data-driven person. So we know that AI is the largest industry on planet Earth. The CAGR is a compounded annual growth rate of 40%. So this means that this industry is expected to grow 40% year after year over the next decade. On average, people would be doing backflips for 2.5%. So to be at 40% for this industry is unbelievable exponential growth. It's a curve that looks like this, right? As far as what that looks like in terms of deployment, over the next 12 months, there's expected to be an additional 100 million jobs in AI in terms of infrastructure and prompt engineering and specific tasks over the next 12 months, like I said. Also, one thing that we're noticing in the industry right now is that there's a massive skill gap, meaning that there's a lot of companies that want to use AI over the roadmap of the next 3 to 6 months. And there's actually more companies that want to use AI than there are developers that know how to build it. So we're kind of in a shortage of talent, but if you're somebody who's looking to break into that field, that's a great place to be. Better than being in the opposite, which is nobody wants your product and everybody's able to do it. Some of the key jobs that are in the AI space are AI engineers, prompt engineers, AI developers, and generative AI consultant. So essentially the way that I like to break it up is there's 3 buckets that you can go into the side of the space of AI. The first one is the engineer route. The engineer essentially is somebody who's going to fine tune the model. They're not the people that are creating it from scratch. They're taking a pre-existing model and finding ways to tailor it to the solutions that they need for their business or enterprise. So you'll see that particularly prompt engineering is probably the most popular job inside of that industry. Second one is in the development space. So these are the people that are actually building the models themselves from scratch. You can think of this like a software developer. So this would be somebody who's going to build the front end and the back ends. But when it comes to AI, we're talking about building out the training data modules. We're talking about the RAG progressions, and we're talking about how these models are going to compete against other engines. And the last one is in the enterprise realm, which is where you get into places like consultant or executive coach for AI. So those are kind of the 3 main categories. We can go through the developer route, we can go through engineering, or we can go straight into enterprise. Yes,
you mentioned on the previous slide certifications and going over 6 courses over the course of 6 months. What are the lengths of the courses? What do you do in those courses? Is there some amount of money that you have to pay for entry? That sort of thing.
That is a brilliant question. Believe it or not, all the courses that I did were completely free. I didn't pay a penny for any of these certifications.
And how do they access them if they want to take them with these?
So there are a few main corporations that are offering them. My top 3 that I would go for would be NVIDIA, would be number 1. Intel would be number 2. And believe it or not, LinkedIn would be number 3. They all have courses that range anywhere between 6 weeks to 6 months. And typically throughout the course, you're going to start with an educational period. Then you'll go through some development yourself and you'll actually be building it out and you'll have an instructor that's going to verify that. And then you'll have an exam and then a certification. So each one's going to look a little bit different, but those are the 3 main people that I would look towards would be Intel, NVIDIA, and LinkedIn. And it would be as easy as saying AI certification, NVIDIA. And I know, for example, last month they released 50 certifications that are for free. So it's a good question. Looking forward as actual job pay, majority of the salaries that are in AI are starting around $180,000 entry level, and they have a rapid curve of stock options. So if we are looking through the employment route, it is a phenomenal field to get into. Yeah, to say the very least, to say the very least. Does anybody else have any questions about the certification processes? No, that's a good one. All right. So this is what we call AI SaaS. If you guys are familiar with software as a service, it was one of the biggest trends in the tech community a couple of years ago. We now have AI as a service, and this is the market from 2020 to 2024. So keep in mind, this is prior to the release of ChatGPT to present day. So this is kind of painting the picture of what's been happening for the last few years. You notice the CAGR is up at 48%, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we notice that the largest growing sector individually is North America, quickly followed by India as number 2. As far as what this is looking like itself, we had a lot of rapid solutions that came out during the COVID era. And quickly people realized, okay, digital seems to be the way. We were really disrupted by day-to-day life by having to work remotely from home. But it was a blessing in disguise because it showed us that we are able to connect digitally and that there are solutions that exist for workers that they can access from a server rather than a company paying software for millions of dollars. So it was beautiful timing that as we get into the work from home, we also have the emergence of generative AI. But this is probably not news to that many people.
What does ALAAS stand for?
That is AI as a service.
And can you explain exactly what that is? For
Yes.
people who might not know what that is.
Brilliant, yeah. So the same way that software as a service is essentially you are creating software as a service provider. So what that means is that a company would essentially hire you and say that the skills that you are going to give to us is a finished and final product, and that product is software. This is different than some of the traditional selling methods in the past. So if we were to give like a brief explanation or a history behind it, pretty much up until the era of software, people predominantly either sold products or their time were the two things that they leveraged. Either I can work with my hands and manually labor myself into producing an outcome, or I can sell a product and that product will also produce outcome. When we got into software as a service, this was one of the most highly leveraged things that you can do with your time. Essentially, you are creating a software and then selling that software then to companies. So where we take that a step further with AI as a service is you're creating AI solutions, whether it be generative AI or workflows, or even something along the lines of an AI product, right? If we were to categorize an AI product, it would be AI as a software or AI as a service. That makes sense. All right. So moving forward, these are, again, over the last 12 months, these are the industries that we've seen have had the most amount of growth inside of here. We noticed that enterprise tends to be the first thing that people turn to. So when generative AI first came out, a lot of companies were taking attention more than the consumers were. Other places that we noticed to have a lot of growth was machine learning, which again is predominantly used for business applications. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between AI, machine learning, and large language models, and kind of where the different context is. We also noticed that there was a lot of people in things like content creation, such as, Adobe or Midjourney or whatever else. And then there's also people that were in the automation and the healthcare business. So over the past 12 months, these were the industries that we noticed tend to have the most amount of success with AI and also the ones that were growing the quickest. But I wanted to show you guys kind of how to quantify the exponential growth that AI is expected to achieve. Again, this is just a little bit about the different types of industries that are in AI. And one thing that I think is really important to notice is when we're talking about AI as a technology, we're also talking about AI and its effects on all industries. So one thing to be really specific on is inside of the space of AI, there are people who work on developing the products and moving the technology further and advancing it. There are also people that focus on AI and sub-industries. For example, healthcare is one of the biggest sub-industries in AI. So these are a bunch of different sub-industries that AI has been greatly affected by, such as higher education, or government, or defense contracts, and whatever else. So this would be moving away from AI as the technology itself and looking at how does this affect into different industries. And this is, over the next 10 years, just one of those particular industries. So this is in the hardware market. So for technology, hardware, we're talking about chips, thermal processors, computers, phones, tablets, all that good stuff. For the hardware, right now, we are somewhere around the realm of $18 billion. And we'll see by the year 2030, we'll be upwards of 60 billion. Not long after that, we'll get into the trillions of dollar realms. And this is just one of the sub-industries of AI. I'm going to show you a lot of graphs that look exactly like this. And the point why I wanted to show you guys is to realize that this type of exponential growth is happening in all industries. This is in hardware. This is in fintech. So fintech, for those of you who are not aware, it is financial technology. So these are people that are working with like financial institutions and banking for AI, which is a really, really large and growing population. Same thing. This is where we are today. And this is where it'll be by the year 2030. Yeah, we're expected to get upwards of $6 trillion in that market size over the next decade. And you notice, same type of exponential growth as the hardware. A little bit, like we said, about healthcare. Healthcare is one of the largest growing industries. Intel is definitely taking care of that industry very well, but there's a lot of healthcare providers that are looking to AI solutions in order to help their patients. There's been a lot of stories in the news recently about people that were diagnosed using ChatGPT, and they were more successful than a doctor diagnosing them. So this is just one of the examples of how it's impacting the healthcare industry. Other one is client management, right? If you're, for example, if you're at a elderly home and you have 10,000 people who live in that elderly home, being able to keep tabs on all of these individual people is extremely time consuming for the staff. Therefore, they're likely to turn to an AI solution because they recognize that they're able to track that large amount of data in a much more efficient process. And that's one of the main things that healthcare is using. Same thing, this is where we are today, and the compounded annual growth rate is upwards of almost 50%. And this is where we will be in a couple of years' time. It's interesting too to see how they have it based off of the section. And we notice pretty much for all of these graphs, North America tends to be growing the quickest, although, like I said, Europe and Asia Pacific is also not far behind. Any questions about any of the graphs we've covered so far? Yeah.
How do you expect it to like go over like even longer periods of time than that kind of issue?
That's a brilliant, brilliant point. So what we are in the point of today is called the early adopter curve. So the early adopter curve means that the fact that we are having this conversation and the people that are tuning in online, we are some of the early adopters in this technology. We'll see over the next 10 years, a radical shift as AI stops to become competitive edge and more of a necessity for these industries. And moving forward after the 10-year mark, because yeah, a lot of the graphs do typically end after the 10-year mark. I personally would expect it to only continue to rise because after 10 years of using AI, it essentially becomes foundational. Right now, essentially, if we have two companies side by side, one uses AI and one doesn't, what I mean by the competitive edge is that the company that's using AI will have much better productivity and efficiency for their workflows. However, if we look 10 years into the future, it'll be pretty standard that all companies will be using AI. If we were to look 20 years into the future, the companies that are not using AI would be drastically far behind those that are. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I would only continue to expect it to grow more and more.
How do AI being used in these different industries affect the job market and getting jobs and people then, you know, these industries hiring AI jobs, or like you said, like healthcare and stuff, what does that look like in terms of like jobs and career outlook?
That is a phenomenal question. So we refer to this as job displacement, which I think is actually one of the most important things when we're talking about AI. And it's unfortunately, it's not a cut and dry answer. So my personal take on that I've always had with my clients has been that it is us as the creators and the users of AI. It is our responsibility to use it ethically. And ethically to me means not disrupting humanity. There is a trade-off. So there will be a lot of jobs that are created from AI going into the industry. Like we said, there will be 100 million jobs over the next 12 months that are expected because of AI. Now, whether companies decide that they want to have massive layoffs and outsource to AI is the ethical question, right? There has been some studies of people that have done this recently. There was a company that was in Finland that up until this year had 1,000 employees. They reduced their team to 10 people. They laid off 99% of their employees, and they were actually still able to increase their productivity. As far as how we can approach this, like as a community and a society, this is part of a larger issue. I think it's up to us to have conversations about what this looks like for the betterment of humanity. So one thing that I always like to tell people that I keep at the frame of mind is we are creating technology that augments and helps humanity, but doesn't replace it, right? So I would really urge people to not look at it so much as we're going to be replacing jobs with AI. More of that will be augmenting and enhancing livelihood with AI. And it's up to the people, the C-suite executives and the presidents and CEOs of those companies to have those conversations and determine how do they want their corporate culture to look. Oh. That's a good question.
So I know more, yes, but how is, so with jobs that are gonna open up, they're all interested in careers in AI.
Mhm.
You know, say Henry says, well, you know, manufacturing or healthcare. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in AI. I want to get a job in AI, but I want to be in the healthcare industry. What does that look like in terms of opening up the careers in these different industries and implementing AI? Like software engineer within healthcare, like what does that look like?
Yeah, so remember when one of the first slides that we talked about the skill gap, where essentially these companies are wanting to use AI at a quicker rate than the talent that we have to fill those jobs. So for people that are looking to break into AI in the healthcare industry, for example, I would say it's an absolute green light. It's an absolute green light that they're looking actively to get people with prompt engineering background and generative AI backgrounds for healthcare, for example. And one thing to note too is that every industry is a little bit different. For example, if you're in the fintech industry, which is one of the previous slides, fintech doesn't really care about generative AI because there's somebody who has a lot of privacy compliance issues and there's a lot of government regulations on the financial industry. Therefore, they lean into what's called automated intelligence. So not artificial intelligence, but automation workflows. So there's somebody who really cares about that subset industry more than somebody like healthcare, which cares a lot more about generative AI. Does that answer the question? Does that answer the question to you guys? Yeah. I'll give you more questions, Hans.
So how do you think AI would affect the schooling industry or education?
Brilliant question. So I think that the schooling industry and education will 100% have to adapt to this technology. I think that it is a very scary reality in which there are educational systems that choose to adapt and that choose to not adapt. If I was to paint a picture, if we were to look 2 years down the road from now, and let's say that Beaverton School District decides to implement AI for their students and for their teachers. So they begin to augment their educational experience with AI, which I think would be a great thing to do. Let's say that HSD decides, no, we don't want our students to be able to use AI, nor do we want our teachers to be able to use AI. That is where the disparity in technology is really going to drive a gap between those two communities. And that is what I'm most afraid of. So I think that if we were to talk about education as a whole, moving towards using AI as a tool to augment is much better than simply neglecting it. Yeah, and I think that a lot of educators are beginning to come around to this reality that AI, just like the calculator or like electricity, these are all tools that change the world entirely, revolutionized it. So to answer your question, I think that AI will revolutionize education. And I think that it's up to the educators and administrators to choose what side of that path that they're on. Makes sense? And I know you guys were pretty similar about that.
I'm also not certain how the education system would even go about enforcing no generative AI policy. Like you have to, like you'd have to do quite a bit of monitoring for that, which, you know, a lot of people would probably protest with what would effectively require the school having access to all of your, you know, like all of the stuff that you do online.
Yeah, I would say that is another hot topic when it comes to regulation. is when we're speaking about regulation, what does that actually look like? Like, what are the actual policies that are in place to make that happen? Oftentimes, if we want to regulate the ban of artificial intelligence, it does mean that people will be asking more privacy related questions. And that typically they will be able to moderate what you're doing on a higher level than you are today. Which is another reason why I'm more prone to using AI as a tool rather than trying to restrict people from using that tool. I also think one thing when we're talking about education is also looking at it from an international standpoint as well. If we were to look at countries that are going to use AI for their students versus countries that will not, again, we'll just drive that gap even further. I think one of the things, like going back to one of the earlier slides, one of the things that I am a really big believer in with AI is the fact that this is one of the first technologies, if not the very first, that allows us to close the gap between people that are performing at a very high level and being top 1%ers and people that are not, right? So typically, like, let's say that we're comparing a school that is overly funded where students pay $40,000 a year to go to that school. The level of education that that student is receiving is top 1%, right? Versus let's say you go to a public school district where they have classes of 75 to one teacher, and you might get 8 minutes of FaceTime with your teacher over the course of the month. You're having two very different learning experiences. The benefit of AI is that you could augment this school that is having subpar learning, and you could bring them to the level of quality and personalization that this school that's a top performer is able to do. So this is one of the best things about AI is the fact that it can personalize your experience. We spoke about this with the Beaverton School District recently too, that this is one of the things that is really making this a game changer, is the fact that you're able to make a experience that is uniquely tailored to the needs of that user, which is something that has never been done before. And I think that's more part of the reason, going back to the education, of why it'll radicalize education, is because no teacher has ever been able to give you undivided attention 24/7, 365, even when you're at home, even when you're on the school to the bus in the morning. It's never been an option before, but now it is. So all the more reason, I think, for people to lean into using it as a tool than avoiding it. Any of the questions, because this is definitely one of the biggest topics in AI is in terms of job displacement and education. Well, let's talk about a little bit about some of the rewards and some of the challenges of being in the space, right? So some of the rewards for being in AI is the fact that you get to pioneer the unknown. We are walking a path that nobody has ever walked before. And to me, this is a beautiful thing because there are no expectations of what it should be, right? So every day is a new day. Like, we are getting technological advancements that, for example, the industry is different than it was 3 weeks ago, different than it was 3 months ago and 3 years ago. So we're at this exponential pace, which all these graphs have been showing. So as we pioneer into the unknown, it's a very amazing place to be because you have a lot of control over what that looks like. It's also probably the major challenge as well, is that you don't have people that you can refer to. For example, I don't have anybody on planet Earth that I could call and say, hey, you've been doing generative AI for 4 years. What do you think? Doesn't exist, right? So that is one of the major challenges, that we are paving a path that's not been walked before. So I'd say that's one of the rewards and one of the challenges. One of the other rewards is the impact that you can have on communities. So part of the reason why I partnered with the Chamber of Commerce in the city of Portland is because I really believe that this technology is revolutionary, particularly for marginalized groups, for people that are underrepresented. And I think that has to be a really important thing for the people that are creating the technology. And I'm not sure if you guys saw this recently, but there was a Google Gemini, which came out, I want to say, a few months ago. And they had bad press in the news because they had essentially made it so that all of their generations, like all of their image generations and text generations, were targeted towards a particular group. So they picked like an ethnic group out of everybody that walks on planet Earth and said, I'm only going to make images that show these types of people. And that is like the exact wrong way, in my opinion, of doing AI. I think that one of the best rewards is being able to go to a community that particularly doesn't have great technological skills or a lot of technological infrastructure and saying, hey, you never had the ability to pay $10 million to have AI in your business before, right? Because you're a small business, maybe you're a minority, right? Now we can use this technology and you can compete with larger companies that previously was never an option before. So that's one of the main things. And then also the thing is accessibility as well. I think one of the best rewards is that the fact that you can help anybody with AI. As long as you have a phone, internet, Wi-Fi, phone service, whatever, you are able to use this technology, which I think is really cool. One of the other rewards for me personally is the creative fulfillment. Like we said, we're going through a path that nobody had ever walked before. So you get to decide what that path looks like. What I mean by creative fulfillment, this is one of the coolest things that I've experienced so far, which is AI iterates and evolves so quickly. So for example, you can have an idea that you come up with today and you can put it out on the market within a matter of weeks, which typically would take years and years if we were to go, back in the early 2010s. So being able to have an idea and see it from ideation to development to deployment, I think is a really profound thing. And the last thing is digital freedom. Somebody who likes the idea of not being tied down to a physical location with work, being able to travel while still performing your work and duties, I think is one of the best things about having a digital business in general, but particularly for AI. Now let's get to some of the challenges. So like we said, pioneering the unknown is very scary. Nobody's ever done it before, right? We're also taking on massive corporations that own the majority share. Like still to this day, recent statistics point that there's only one company that controls 88% of the market for AI. Again, this is one of my greatest fears and one of the greatest challenges that we have to overcome is essentially we're trying to compete against companies that have trillion-dollar R&D, which that is an obscene thing, right? But AI allows us to do that. So we're trying to compete against really large companies as a smaller company. We're also trying to compete against the majority of people that are using only one platform. So like you guys will see, and we'll use some other platforms later today, but there is plenty of other platforms that exist besides OpenAI. And in fact, there are 14,000 platforms to date for AI development. But when I say AI, what's the first thing you guys think of? ChatGPT, right? Yeah, because they own 88% of the market. So that's part of the thing is like that's one of the challenges that we have to overcome. The other thing, like I said, is exponential evolution, meaning that if I create a product today, in 6 months' time, unless I continuously innovate, that product will be outdated, which that is unlike any other industry before. For example, when you guys are going to school today, and if you have to pull out a textbook, I guarantee you that textbook was not written in the last 8 months, right? Because it's something that evolved at a much slower pace. So it means that the challenges are that you have to continuously be innovating and looking towards new solutions that are coming out. And the last bit is education, education, education. I think this is the hardest thing in the AI space is that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of miseducation about what AI can do and what it can't do. Like there are a lot of people in the media that are making AI out to be from the Will Smith movie or the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, right? So having to deal with that misinformation and actually educate people on, hey, no, this is the limitations, these are the capabilities, I think was one of the things that I underestimated most about being in AI. Yeah, because I typically would have conversations with people and I'd be like, oh, AI's the way, AI's the way. And they're like, no, AI's going to take over the world and kill everybody. And I was like, okay, wait, hold up. There is definitely a middle ground between both of these viewpoints I was talking about right now. And that was something that I struggled with quite a bit. Any questions about any rewards, challenges, unforeseen?
This isn't really a question, but, whether a person, thinks that AI is a good thing or a bad thing, or, oh, it can be used in good ways and it can be used in bad ways. I hope we can all agree that anyone who argues whether or not generative AI is a good thing based on whether or not it's quote unquote true art is a blight upon the discussion.
Definitely, yeah. So it's adding a new type of art that's never existed before. Yeah. Like I'm not sure if you guys seen, there's been a lot of artists, musicians that have like petitioned against the use of AI, which I understand they don't want their likeliness to be replicated by AI. But I think exactly what you just said, which is we are creating a new type of art, and we'll do that in just a little bit. We're creating a new type of art that previously was not available before. So saying that it's copying existing art, I think is not the right take on it. More, it's a computer rendition, I like to say, when it comes to the AI art.
When we look at the exponential evolution and all this education, how would you go about
like learning about AI? Because we have these courses, but let's say we finish the courses, it's always changing. What should we do from there?
Okay, can I give you guys a nerdy answer? Okay, this is the way that I've used AI to stay up to date with AI. So essentially, I looked at the top 10 publications in the tech space. People like GeekWire, TechCrunch, AInews.com, all these types of people. And essentially, I created a bot that every time that an article is published, it sends me like a 1 paragraph summary of what was just published. So, and I send it to myself as an email, and so I have like one email folder that just gets completed and added on every single day. So that's one innovative way to leverage your technology to stay up to date. The other ways that you can stay up to date is by following people that are leading in the space is one of my favorite recommendations. For example, Andrew Eng, who is one of the top people in the space. I constantly look towards the type of content that he's putting out. I also do put out a daily AI newsletter as well that I talk about all the AI news. Shameless plug, I know. But I would look towards people that are innovating in that space. For example, too, like I would say that AI is such a large category. I think it would be impossible to stay up to date on everything because there's so much moving at such a quick space. So I would say pick the sub-industry that you're most interested by, look at who is performing at the top of that industry, and then just stay on top of their content. And we call it social listening. So it's like we are just paying attention to the type of things that we're putting out. And we're not accepting everything as fact or everything as good potential. We're still filtering it and saying like, okay, this is an idea that I think is applicable for me. This is an idea that I think might be good for so-and-so. This is an idea that I don't.
What about continuing education options in terms of courses, PCC, U of O,
Yeah,
any universities for continuing education and getting degrees in computer science and so forth
yeah.
to get for careers in AI?
I would say having constant education is always a great thing for just about anything that you could do. As far as where I would go to do it, I would typically go to things like PCC or things that are low cost options. So that way you're not going through multiple degrees. And this is obviously after you've already built your foundational education, right? So, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit. Like the one thing that I'm really excited to share with you guys is some of the reflections that I've had, like that I would do very differently if I was in your shoes. So going on a side note tangent, I think that like the fact that you guys are in this room talking about AI, I'm so jealous because I wish that happened when I was your age. I would be all over it. So I think this is such a cool conversation that we're having. So I highly encourage everybody to go through higher education in terms of computer science and AI. And part of that continued education piece is looking at, okay, what are some other organizations that I can refer to that would give me up-to-date news? CARE, for example, right? Yeah, another shameless plug. I think there's plenty of opportunities out there. Any other questions about that? All right. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what day-to-day operations look like. Because I know that AI is pretty like up there in the clouds, and everyone's like, okay, that sounds like a great concept, but like, what do you actually do, right? I get asked that all the time. So one of the most important things about my job is overseeing the development, deployment, and integration of AI. When we look back to over the last year, at the time, I was the person in my organization that I was actively building everything every day. So I was building both front end and back end and the MLM and all that fun nerdy stuff, right? So now that I have outsourced our team, we've grown to have multiple engineers. Now I oversee their development, but that's still a very real thing that we do on a day-to-day basis. So we always check in and say, hey, how are these projects doing? Where are you at in your timeline? So I consider it more project management than just about anything. The second thing is now, particularly I'm focused on creating partnerships with people in my local community for consulting and for software development. So I'm actively pursuing going after new clients or organizations that are willing to work with or that I think that would be mutually beneficial. And that's, again, a really, really important part because one thing that I've realized through this journey is that you can go far by yourself, but you can go further with other people in the space. On top of that, we have team management and talent improvement. And this would be just like any other job. Any other executive job would be in the same boat, which is we want to grow our team to have really skilled and quality talent. And we also want to continue to innovate and get new people in there as we continue to grow. Other things are client outreach and community engagement, which this is our community engagement right here in real time. So we're focused on who do we think needs to hear our message and how can we reach them? These are questions I'd like to ask. We are also, I still do all of the debugging for all of our code. So mainly because one thing that's really funny about being in AI, especially as like you work your way to being an executive, is that problems don't stop happening. As much as you like your process to be really efficient, problems are always going to continue to happen. Just as you get bigger, your problems become harder. So I still actively play a role in all the debugging. And then also, I don't play too much of a role in this. Is like one of the lower responsibilities on my tier, but it's particularly like managing all of our ongoing clients is another thing as well. Since we do have things where we sell software as a service or AI as a service, like we talked about in the beginning, that was what a lot of our early days were about in generative AI. Now we switched predominantly into consulting. So now we deal a lot more with client management than we previously did. And those are two kind of different fields that we wanted to venture into. But now it's time for some fun. So I've been talking and talking, but I think it's time to show you guys something. So I have 3 major platforms, and let's just see by a show of hands, who is familiar with ChatGPT? See, I told you guys, right? I told you, #1 platform. Who is familiar with Adobe Firefly? Yep. All right. For those of you who don't know, Adobe Firefly is text to image. So let's backtrack a little bit before we get into all the software, okay? So in the realm of generative AI, we have this thing that's called multimodality. Essentially, that means that we have, sorry, I thought you could see one of my AI notifications just pop up while my bots are doing work. So inside of multimodality, it means that we're able to change the input and the output and the format in which we receive it. So if we were to give a little brief history lesson, because I think this is really fascinating. So if we were to go back 2 years ago, we could only do text input and output, meaning that I can throw text into an engine and I would get text back out. And this was like the early days of ChatGPT before any other type of model got out there. Fast forward to today, 2 years later, I can send an image in and I can get an image out. I can send text in and I can get an image out. I can send in a video and get text out. So there's 4 main criteria in terms of the modes, and these can go interchangeable back and forth. They're text to speech, text to image, text to text, and text to video. The fun way, if you think about the way it worked in terms of sequential order, was the first thing that we had was text to text. Second thing we had was text to speech. Do you guys think Siri is quite literally text to speech? Right, we've had that for quite a bit. Then we got into text to image. And I'm sure you guys have seen like the old school Will Smith eating spaghetti pasta, the terrible images that first came out when we had those types of tools. And if you combine all of those things, you get text to video, which is the most recent revelation in the industry. For example, OpenAI coming out with Sora is absolutely monumental. And I highly encourage you guys to look into Sora. It's basically OpenAI, the developers behind ChatGPT, are making a text model, and they right now are exclusively selling it to Hollywood. So that way they can make AI generated movies, which I'm sure we'll be seeing coming out pretty soon. So those are all the different modes in which we can communicate to and from the bot. So Adobe Firefly is a text to image model. In that, as you guys will see in a second, we're going to put text into the input, and the output that we're going to see is going to be an image. Is anybody familiar with 11 Labs? You heard about it? Yeah, okay, cool. So 11 Labs is text to sound, text to speech. Yeah, so I'm going to put in, and we're going to do this together. We're going to come up with a phrase that we want the AI to say. And I'm going to show you guys ways to make it so that you can get a good result and make sure that you don't get a good result.
Can you make sure that students who are on student can participate in this as well?
Oh yeah. Because I actually see you guys. Okay, cool. So I have 5 prompts that I've already made, and we can make our own prompts in a little bit. These were random prompts that I had ChatGPT make. So there's nothing special about them. I did not craft them. I did not work on them. I just said, hey, GPT, what are some good prompts? And give it back to me. So I would love to try Adobe Firefly. Let's make sure that buddy's pulled up. All right. So, and let's do a little vote. I have options 1 through 5. And then for those of you that are in person, you can throw hands up in the air. And for those that are online, we'll monitor the chat as well. I'll kind of walk through each one of the prompts and then let you guys know what we're doing now. So number one is create a vibrant cityscape at sunset, which is generate an image of a futuristic cityscape during sunset. The city should have high-rise buildings with vast services reflecting the orange and purple hues of the sky, bustling streets with hover cars, pedestrians walking on elevated sidewalks. Sounds pretty interesting. Yeah, a little dystopian. Next one would be produce an image of a serene landscape showcasing a peaceful mountain lake at dawn. The scene should include mist hovering over the calm water, clear sky with the first light of sunrise, and wildflowers in the foreground. That's gonna be a hard one, I can tell. There's a lot of specificity to that. Next one is create an image of an 18th century market square in Paris. The scene should be lively with vendors selling fruits and textiles, townspeople in period costumes, and horses pulling wooden carts with the Notre Dame Cathedral visible in the background. Well, yeah, two more. Generate an image depicting a space colony on Mars with astronauts in modern spacesuits exploring the red Martian landscape. Futuristic habitats and advanced technology and a distant view of Earth and sky. The last one is the underwater. Let's create an image of a diver exploring a vibrant coral reef. The scene should include colorful coral formations, a variety of tropical fish swimming around, and a sunken pirate ship in the background with rays of light filtering through the water. I want to see it all. But let's see, which one do you guys thinking?
Yeah, I have 2 for 5 on
Two.
Emily and Suhani.
All right. Dang. Okay, number 5 it is. So all I'm gonna do is I'm going to copy and paste this prompt, which GPT gladly gave to me. And we're gonna put it into Adobe Firefly. This is also a free tool, so I haven't even signed in to this. Like I just went to this URL. And we're gonna wait just a second to see what type of response we're gonna get back. And not too bad, not too bad. Notice over here too, there are a bunch of different things that we could do as parameters. Like for example, I could say, I want to give you a certain style that I want you to replicate or an effect that I would like. So when text to image first came out, none of those tools were available. It was, I put in a prompt and I got back out a pretty bad prompt to be honest, or a pretty bad image to be honest. But now with Firefly, who are definitely leading in terms of this space, you get to choose all these other parameters. Yeah, Todd?
So how do you think Adobe Firefly compares to like ChatGPT 4's image generation?
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point. So you want to add to it?
We should put it in chat.
We should put it in the ChatGPT? Well, why not, guys? Because you already have ChatGPT pulled up. I always keep it open, and we'll let that run in the background kind of while we talk about the difference. So what ChatGPT uses is called DALL-E 3. And DALL-E 3 is seen as kind of the base model for AI image generation. Another one to mention is Midjourney. In terms of the output that you'll receive, the reason why I like Firefly is because they have all of the training data that comes from Adobe, and Adobe being, Premiere Photoshop and having all this content in terms of what to expect. I particularly like using Adobe. The other thing that you notice too is when it comes to GPT, you have a little bit less features that you can choose from. Some features that were just added this week are actually the in-painting feature. So now I can choose and select different articles. So for example, we could say, let's give it a mermaid. Let's say a purple mermaid. So that's one thing that has been added pretty recently.
And
Yeah.
so do these cost money, like with Firefly and then the ChatGPT, are there, which one's free, which one's gonna cost money?
So they're both free.
Oh, really?
Mhm. Yeah. And I would say that if you use a ChatGPT Pro, then you get to have GPT-4, which I believe gives you a better version of DALL-E 3. I actually have not gotten, once I upgraded from Pro, I haven't gone back. So it's like the easiest $20 I've ever spent in my life. I know Adobe Firefly is free, for sure. Let's see. And see how it didn't really add what it is we wanted to. So this is a prime example. This was a feature that was added last week, so we can't expect too much from it yet. And this is kind of like the actual limitations of AI.
Yeah, so the same thing works on Firefly. It's been there for a long time. We can just circle around the area and add one.
Do you want to try doing the same thing over here?
It's a generative AI. thing. On the top.
And then let's add something in here. Let's try to add same thing, a mermaid up here. Yeah, and this is, I typically like Adobe as my favorite. You're welcome to try, Midjourney is another popular one too. Say, let's just go purple mermaid. Shouldn't be too crazy. Same thing. Another thing that I like about Adobe too is it gives you multiple outputs rather than ChatGPT just gives you the one at a time. Yeah, yeah, still getting there too. So one of the things that we could talk about, let's say, and we can try this again real quick too. So let's say we want to be a little bit more specific with our prompt. We would say something lines, purple mermaid, would say photorealistic, even like, and then we'd say, what is a good reference? Say
Ariel.
Clearly, you know which movies I didn't watch as a child. I was like, I know there's a mermaid out there, but I'm not aware. Mm-hmm. And then we'll see how it does the second time around. Still not quite getting it. Still not quite getting it. And that's okay. It's the trial and error that makes the image generation the fun part. Yeah. Yeah. There's other things that I like to do too. Like typically the remove tool or the generative build are some other features that I like inside of it. Yeah. And let's go back out to here. Between the two, which one did you guys like better for the original?
I think probably ChatGPT. Yeah. I think that image is a lot cooler.
Mm-hmm.
It looks a little less real though, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one looks more like,
Mm-hmm.
more realistic. I think.
Yeah, yeah.
This one looks more like.
And that's the one thing that's really interesting to know too, is like the more that people use these tools, the more accurate that they're going to become, which is the silver lining. In addition to that, the harder it's going to be able to tell what's AI generated, what's not AI generated. To put it into perspective, if you saw this, pretty clearly be like, yeah, I think AI made that, right? But if we're to have this conversation in a year from now, chances are probably wouldn't be able to tell, right? So the more people that are using these models, the more accurate that they become, which is one of my other favorite things about AI as well. Let's see, do you guys want to see another one for image generation? Is another one?
So we want to push the boundaries with number 2. With that landscape.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think out of all of them, this is the one that I'm really interested to see as well. And then I'll put it into both of them as well. Yeah, this screen. Now you wait and see. This is the fun part. Actually, not bad. No. So the one thing that I've noticed consistently with AI images that are very challenging is still human-like features. I think that like to most people, telling that this is, you can tell that this was painted, for example. We could also change some of the features over here. But I think the landscape tends to do a lot better than human-like, like a facial quality. Yeah, I think both of them did decently well.
We did that on the show for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And we didn't have to add any mermaids, so it has to be a little bit better, yeah. Now, moving on to the next tool that I wanted to show you guys is ChatGPT, but I also wanted to share kind of a little bit of how I use it and versus how some other people might use it. Because there's definitely things that people do where we're not optimizing the tool to the best that we can get it. So for example, we have our 5 prompts right here. Same thing, I'm gonna ask everyone to vote and then we're gonna walk through it a little bit. So number 1 is to explain a complex concept very simply. For example, explain the theory of relativity in its implication in simple terms suitable for high school students. I would take it a step even further and I would say, make it so a 3-year-old can understand it. Next one is story generation. So write a short story about a time traveling detective who must solve a mystery that could change the course of history. Number 3 is technical description. So describe the process and benefits of solar energy conversion and photovoltaic cells, whatever that second word means. Next one is provide a analysis of the economic impacts of the Silk Road on Asian civilizations, so historical analysis. The last one is a futuristic technology proposal. So propose a concept for a new type of environmental friendly transportation technology to be used in urban centers in 2050. Of this, same thing, we'll go for a vote. What are you guys thinking? Okay, I think we'll do number 1 and then do number 5. All right, so, and we can make it a step even further. So I had to go into my GPT over here. Say, please explain the theory of relativity, its implications. And then let's make this for a 5-year-old. Anything else you guys want to add to it? Just give it one. That's easy. This is gonna be
Should
easy
we,
one.
should we ask it to provide like a graph or like maybe an example?
I
They'll explain it or?
wouldn't. So like and here's the thing. So when it comes to graphs, typically you're gonna get what's called a hallucination, which is still the point that we're at right now. Hallucination is when the AI thinks of something that doesn't exist, right? However, I would use it for the story for it. So like that second prompt example where it says like, okay, we're gonna create a story. You could use the image generation to generate like a story book with what you could expect or some of the characters. I think when it comes to being able to be actually graphing something or having very like technical information, I still think the image generation is lacking just a little bit. Let's give it this one. Eh? I would say a 5-year-old might be okay to follow the first part. I think the second part might be a little bit outside of the realm of a 5-year-old's understanding, right? Okay, so here's how we go back and forth with pumping in real time. Say, and just like you would tell a colleague, say, that sounds a little complex. Please simplify so that my 5-year-old can clearly understand. And this is now where I like to have fun with it. So one of my favorite things to do with AI is to scale the output. So for example, if you ask a simple input, you'll get a simple response. However, one way that you can save yourself time is by saying, hey, for example, give me 5 variations of this example for my child. So the chances are, if I go back and forth just one, it might take me a couple of iterations in order to get to a result that I like. But I said, hey, let's actually scale the input or scale the output. Because one thing about AI is and this is like a really key concept, is the amount of time that it takes you to explain this to a child might be similar to what it takes AI to explain it to a child on one output. But if I said, hey, human, give me 10 different stories about X, right? It would take the human much, much longer because of the compounded effect versus the AI. So I think one of the key things in ways that it helps is by scaling the output. For example, let's see here. Yep, and I think this would be a lot simpler than the first one, right? Yeah, more like simple language, not getting too technically savvy, keeping it short and concise to match like the 5-year-old's attention span. Now, if we were to take it a step further, same thing, let's pick a number 1 through 5, and we're going to transfer it to 1. All right, 1 it is. So if I say this, I can actually paraphrase this, and I can say, now explain this to a PhD student using only technical jargon. Yeah. It's going to lose this very quickly. Yeah, 8 words in and I'm lost. So this is the one thing, like I said, like it's very easy. And you guys can see this is much more savvy than the image generation simply because this model has been available for a lot longer. We have trained the data on text to text much more than we have on text to image. So if we're looking forward in the next few years, this is what I would expect image to be at that same level where it's able to get that output that you want on the first desired prompt and maybe the second desired prompt rather than going back and forth. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as you're trying the different types of tools, is that not a lot of them have been out for a while, so you have to give them a little bit of grace in the beginning. And yeah, literally using all the formulas and everything, I think it did a good job. Now, let's turn this into a speech now. You guys with me? Convert the response into a speech. Who's a nice speaker that you guys like?
Morgan Freeman.
Huh?
Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman style. Use his tone, verbiage. What else is there? Speaking modalities. Use only appropriate and school approved information. All right. And now what we're going to do. I don't know if you guys, I'm hearing it in your voice as well.
So we were after this, so basically one time me and my friends were talking in group chat. I took every sentence and asked ChatGPT to convert this into like a Shakespeare type of thing. And I want to see how it do with it.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. You said, great job. I always tell it it's doing a good job. I'm not sure if other people do, but I always say, doing good, man, doing good. I like to be polite, just in case the Terminator does come true. It'll be like, I remember you were nice to me. You say, great job, convert this into Shakespeare speech. I'm just gonna leave it that simple. And then while this is going, I'm actually going to take this and run it into, come on now. Sorry, the Zoom thing's in the way, so I can't really zoom things back. Let's just take the first little bit of this. Now, 11 Labs is the next one here. And 11 Labs is really simple and quite easy to use. The same way that you would, all you have to do is put an input in. There are some settings that you can tailor a little bit. So for example, I can say, hey, I want it to be extremely monotone, extremely stable, or I want it to have high similarity so that way all the words sound the same. The difference is like in the human speech, if we said similarity would be like, when I say this, these, like all the different versions of saying that word, you're saying, hey, every time you say the word this, I want you to sound the same. And then the last one is exaggerated speech. There are some other more additional things that you can do as well too. And they have different versions of this. So let's go with the most, I guess, up to date. And then one thing that I'm always doing when we have text to speech is breaking up the blocks a little bit. So I've noticed if I was to take like a paper where we have 12 sentences in a paragraph, typically around the 75% mark, it starts to have more modulations. And it'll sometimes, this is very strange, we'll show you in a second. Sometimes it has like different accents or different communication patterns that we did not tell it to do. So the best way that we can get around that is by being really short and concise. So we'll have this going in the background while we come back to our Shakespeare. Yeah, lend thine ear to a tale of the cosmos. I like it. I like it. And then we'll do this for the next one. And we'll give it a little bit longer. Go back a week. And then I'll turn off my sound so that you guys can hear it.
It might like that because the audio is connected with that. So you're not going to be able to play audio. It won't go through.
Oh. How about that? Yep. And so this is just 11labs.io up top. And yeah, they have a bunch of different things in here too.
You can copy those and put them into the chat too, so the students online have the URLs.
Yeah, with the chat and then. And I'll send over for Firefly as well. And this is just gonna throw you into my chat, which you don't need, so there you go. Yeah, so other cool things that they're currently doing with 11 Labs is you're actually able to dub into different languages now. One of the really cool things for content creation in this is, for example, say that you have a podcast in English, but you know that you have a global audience. You can now dub it into multiple different languages, literally just by selecting German, Portuguese, French, whatever else, right? You can also do the same with live audio with multiple speakers as well. One of the coolest things that I think, but it's also one of the biggest implications in terms of this information is the voice tab. So 11 Labs comes preset with voices that sound very robotic. Oh yeah, I was going to show you some of the other ones that I've done in the past. It sounds very robotic. If you guys think of what Siri sounds like, Siri doesn't sound like a real person, right? But you can tell that sounds like Siri speech. I'm sure some of you guys are on TikTok. Okay, so you know in TikTok, how you can also say voice character, that's also text to speech from 11 Labs. They're using 11 Labs IPO. Now, one of the things that gets into a ethical conundrum is when we want to use or replicate someone else's speech. So the technology now only requires maximum 15 seconds, minimum 2 seconds of someone's voice in order to replicate them. And this has really immense implications for scammers, for fish artists, for people that are doing bad things with that nature. So this is one thing that we would definitely, like as a community, have to watch out for, is we're gonna have to really up our game in terms of how much we pay attention to putting our voice out there online.
You see a lot of meme videos on YouTube where it's like, ah, the president's played Minecraft or whatever, and like it's kind of funny, but then you consider like, oh, you know, this stuff could be used to, you know, I fabricate like actual serious stuff, political figures.
All that was using 11 Labs. Yeah, all of those videos that you're talking about were using 11 Labs. So 11 Labs actually gave part of their patent to the US government, and they came up with a policy that said that you cannot replicate any politicians 6 months before and 6 months after the election. So this is pretty much holding us in like a 12-month, like a 1-year pause on this type of technology, which I think is a really good thing to be able to slow it down. Moving forward, 6 months after the election, we'll see how they continue to proceed. But it's one of the only policies on AI-generated voice that exists today across the whole world.
I was gonna ask, like, I was gonna say, does 11 Labs have an option you upload files of speech? Like,
Yeah, you can train. So for example, if I go under my voice tab and I can say instant voice cloning, just like that. Literally, if I had a 2-second clip of your voice, I could clone it right there. Now, but yeah, from an academic perspective, we were not recommending. This is something to, like, we're showing you this type of technology, we're not recommending it. The reason we're showing it is because it has to be aware of this. Otherwise, I think we get into a really bad scenario in society if we don't have these types of conversations. You know, same thing goes for AI generated image and for text as well. Yeah, just the total use of AI, like we can talk about ethics in a little bit as well. But it's one of the things that I think is really important, particularly for those of us that are using it. Because like we said, we're the early adopters in this space because we're having this conversation. The majority of people are not even aware of these technologies existing. So the responsibility is kind of on us to make sure that we're actually using it in the proper way where we're having the betterment of humanity and not replacing humanity or trying to tarnish it. Any questions about that? We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. I think after we've seen all of that, I think we'll go back to the presentation. Yeah? So this is the high school reflection that I was talking about. So, like I said, I'm extremely jealous of everybody in this room. I wish that I was in school at the time of ChatGPT. I'll tell you that right now. Not because of anything academic-wise or using it for school, simply because I think that it's phenomenal that the education system that we have, like in our local community, is willing to even facilitate this conversation, right? So, if I were you guys, the first thing I would do today I would experiment with all of those tools that we went after. Adobe, 11 Labs, GPT. And keep in mind that these are just some of the platforms that exist. There's far more platforms that are less popular. And I highly recommend checking those out as well too. I'm not saying that these are the best ones on like that exist. They're very good. But I think it's important to experiment is what I'm saying. So I would start experimenting and like you said, you're using it for group chat with your friends. Like that is the definition of experimentation. You're not using it for financial gain. You're not using it for your school, literally experimenting with it and saying, hey, what can this do and what can it not do? We call it like capabilities limitations are like one of the most important things to recognize in AI. I would also really push you guys towards going into AI or CS in college. This is something that I didn't do. And if I had to go back and be in your guys' shoes, this would be 100% what I would move towards. I went to school for exercise science. So look how much good that's doing to me right now, right? So given that you guys all have interest in AI and especially in different realms of it as well, I would highly recommend going through like the academic pursuit. And people have asked me before, like, do you recommend academic or would you go third party, whatever else? I think that the foundational understanding is really important to come from academic because I think it gives you a framework in which you can approach the world. I will say there are ways that you can continue to educate yourself after academics, and I think those are also very important too. So I'm not taking one or the other, but I think as everybody in this room, I would definitely encourage you guys to go after the academic pursuit because like I said, it's going to help you kind of navigate the world and say, okay, I recognize this is one of the sub-industries. This is one of the subtopics. This belongs in that field. Kind of helps you sort through this massive umbrella of AI. And then after you become educated in it, that's when you can decide, hey, this is kind of the field that I really want to dive in. Like, for example, for me, it was generative AI. It was the thing I was most interested in. So after getting the third party knowledge, I was like, okay, this is how I'd like to dive into that field. And I think that if I had had the academic background with it, I think it would have only enhanced it even further.
And what are some opportunities, like I know you talked about your certifications in terms for students who don't have that option to go to college, maybe don't want to go to college, don't have the financial ability to go to college. As you know, we're moving forward, we're understanding that college isn't necessarily for everyone and not that push. So what are some other opportunities available for students who are thinking about it, maybe on the edge, so forth, who still want to get into maybe a career in software engineering or within AI, in the AI?
Yeah, and I know that the academic's not the only route for sure. Like you can still get phenomenal jobs without going through the academic route. Those would be the three places I was talking about earlier. I would start with LinkedIn, NVIDIA, Google also has them. Yeah, Intel has them as well. A bunch of different certification courses that they offer. And I would say the reason why I would leverage those are because they're free, so you don't have to go out of pocket. They're all digital, don't have to go in person. And they are completed at your own pace. So if you have a bunch of time, let's say that during summer, for example, when you know school is at a low, this would be a great time to hop into those opportunities and just start getting familiar with what's in the space. So I would highly recommend that. For those of you that are really interested, like that would be 100% what I would do next. Other things is I would research mentorships and internships in your desired field. Yeah. And the reason is because, like I said, there's no rule book or there's no game plan for how generative AI is going. So the best thing you can do is learn from people that are just a little bit further in that pace than you are, and then you learn from a little bit that are further from them, and so on and so forth. So that's one thing that I would definitely leverage. And this is one of the most important things, in my opinion, is leveraging your network to beta test ideas. For those of you that are interested in like actually creating your own type of solutions, there is no better network than a high school. Believe it or not, Even if you go to a college with 40,000 people, you don't see them every day. You might see a few of them in classes or in passing, but you don't have an impact on them the same way that you do in high school, because high school is just a lot more close-knit community. Whether you have like 1,000 or 3,000 kids, chances are you actually come face to face with far more people than you would at any other point in life, even through higher education or through the workforce. So, and I've had a few people that I've worked with as well that have had good success, that they use their relationships with people inside of school to be able to test it really quickly. Because like the one thing about AI is because it can evolve so quickly, you can go from no beta users to 1,000 beta users in the span of like 3 weeks. And then at that point, you have all the data that you need in order to enhance your product before you put it out to everybody else. So if we're talking about other things too, because we're getting towards the end here, so we're gonna open it up for questions in a sec. So we're talking through the development, like from ideation to development to deployment. One of the key things is when you create your solution, you want to have as many people use it as possible, predominantly while it's free. Because believe it or not, people like free stuff. I know it's crazy. I know it's crazy. People like free stuff, right? And what you're doing is essentially you're giving them a solution that is typically paid for, but in exchange, they're also helping you train the model. Because as they continue to use it, number one, your model is going to get more accurate. Number two, you'll come across those problems that are pretty significant prior to actually charging for it. Because when something's free and you have problems with it, people tend to be okay with it. Because they're like, all right, I understand I didn't pay anything for this, therefore I'm not at a loss if this thing doesn't follow through, which the first few or the first few hundred will have problems that fall through. Now, when you get into paid solutions, say that a company is paying you, or you have it open on the App Store, for example, and you're having paid users and you have those same types of issues that could have been solved in beta, that is where you run into issues of like tarnishing your reputation, your credibility, which are the slowest things to build and the quickest things to go in business. And that is that for the presentation. But I wanted to open up to questions because we've talked about so much, and I know there's probably questions out there for people. And you got the NVIDIA certification?
Yeah, we'll put it.
Okay, cool.
So what are some problems that your past clients had?
Brilliant, yeah. I think a lot of it goes down to the education and the expectations. I think a lot of people look to AI to solve all their problems, believe it or not. And AI, for the most part, can't solve everything. So some stuff that I personally have with my clients is where they would expect the AI to be able to do everything for their business. And like, for example, they wanted to be able to train their team and email people and call people and do research and post for them and quite literally all the different realms. And there are a bunch of different tools that together could create that type of workflow. But I think that people would go to like things like ChatGPT and expect those same type of results. So I'd say like managing expectations and education is probably the number one thing that I've had. We also run into some technical errors, as always, such as like when you. Okay. No, but I worked hard. Like technical errors, for example, like you want to have this bot and share it to other people, and it's on a private server, so they don't have access to it. And the key is like when people run into these types of issues, most users are not motivated to continue using the app if they have a negative experience in the first like X amount of uses. So the thing is like you want to make sure that people are able to onboard into your platform seamlessly and that they know this is what it's expected of this tool to do and this is what this tool can do. That's a good question.
AI relate to machine, like just basic machine learning?
Brilliant. Okay, so basically you can think of, Russian nesting dolls. Are you guys familiar with that? The Russian nest, like the dolls that fit inside of each other. So machine learning is the biggest doll. Machine learning essentially goes back even into the 50s, right? And essentially, machine learning is when we take vast amounts of data and have the AI be able to analyze information and predict the next model. That is the highest level. We got the borders on, and like here's the fun part is that's machine learning. It starts to infringe on large language models with LLMs like ChatGPT, for example, which have even larger context windows and their ability to predict next word is even better. So typically like machine learning was used by businesses in the late 20th century to basically run operations and analyze data. And the way that they took it a step further with large language models was the ability to communicate back and forth with that machine. And that's when we got into being able to predict the next word or be able to predict intent is a really big deal. And then to take it even a step in further, that's where we get into things like generative AI. So the machine learning is the largest subset. Then AI or LLM is underneath there. And then generative AI is underneath LLM. So
What's the cost of that?
there, nothing yet. Nothing yet. Yeah. Generative AI is pretty far as filtered as you can go. And yeah, we can definitely dive more in depth on machine learning if people are interested. But I would say, if it's something that you're interested in, then I would definitely look towards some of those certifications to just familiarize like the different topics. I see there's a question in the chat as well.
Yeah, you will.
My school does not offer computer science related courses. Yeah, that's a great question. I know that PCC does have really good options for computer science. My best advice to you guys, from somebody who's had multiple interns in the past, is start with an internship, because the internship will essentially, you'll see firsthand experience whether or not this is the field that you want to get into with your day-to-day operations. And if you go through the internship and you find it to be helpful or beneficial, then I would start looking at third party such as PCC or other community college programs. And typically I prefer those to the main 4-year programs, just because most of them will have online programs. Most of them are at a much lower cost, and it allows you to experiment without putting too much of your bank account down, essentially. So yeah, so to rephrase, I would start with an internship and then look at PCC, because PCC does have really good options, and we're looking at increasing more.
Can I share my screen for a second?
Mhm.
That's a cool second. So this is a cool website just to show it's 6 artificial intelligence AI jobs to consider in 2024. And so we scroll down, there's artificial intelligence engineer, and it shows like the average salary, machine learning engineer, data engineer, robotics engineer. So these are all different careers within the AI space that you can kind of look at. And then data scientist and shows those things, and then how to get a job in AI. So that kind of shows us like the different skills, consider earning a degree, and then build practical AI skills. So this is a really cool one right here. And we can share this website out to anybody who's interested, but this also talks about the different certifications you can get and things there.
And I have actually done a few of these from Coursera, like the bottom 2 right there, the IBM AI Engineering and the Applied AI Professional, were both ones that I did. I highly recommend Coursera as well. If you guys are familiar with Andrew, one of my mentors, he's like one of the godfathers of, he's the co-founder of Coursera and Google DeepMind, and now Anthropic and AWS.
And by the looks of it, those are free.
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
free, so
free,
you
free
get,
online.
those are things to go and get. And
Highly recommend.
if you're interested in going to school for software engineering or anything, you can go get these certifications, kind of see a little bit more of what that outlook in those specific careers are going to look like. And you can do these as high school students.
Yeah, I think this was actually one of the first ones that I did as well. Like, I think one of the first starting points was the Applied AI. So I was really interested in being like, okay, what does this actually mean? Like the implications of it. So that one I definitely can personally recommend. Mhm. Yeah, I would share that in the chat for sure. It's very helpful.
Of course. So you talked about a lot about like generative AI, which is of course the area that you specialize in. But an often slept on part of AI is like the classification or like the reflection part of it. Like, what do you think about the landscape of that side of AI?
That's a phenomenal question. It's phenomenal. I think that for regressions particularly, I think there's a lot of innovations to be had from smaller engineers. So I see it as a space where you can have a big impact without having a big network or being attached to a big company. Like, I think some of the biggest innovations in like the RAG model, for example, is coming from small people that have just put it out, like open source, GitHub. Like, I think those avenues are really, really helpful. As far as like as an industry as a whole, I think that typically they're going to be dominated by bigger tech giants that have a lot of data to train the classification models on, particularly like big data is the one that I look towards. So it's one of the reasons why I didn't get into that field, because I was looking at the competitive landscape and I realized that, okay, there's a lot of people that have really large companies that have lots of R&D behind it. And also being able to develop a classification model takes a lot more time and energy than it does for generative AI. So that's the reason why I didn't touch into it. But I think that would be a phenomenal field, especially if you want to go through the business route, the enterprise route. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of implications to be had for big data for big businesses with classification models. So I think, yeah, of course. Do you guys recognize what he's talking about with the classification and whatnot? No.
Oh, yeah, so, classification is like, being able to look at a photo and like tell the computer able to tell you what the item in like a photo is. Or like being able to differentiate between like two different things, like a dog or a cat, or a happy face or a sad face. It can like read emotions, etc., stuff like that.
And for those of you who don't know, those two guys, I actually watched their presentation like 2 weeks ago for the Beaverton School District, because they have a company that's called Air, which you guys would definitely, I highly suggest asking them after this.
Of course.
Yeah, because it particularly built, they're from Sunset High School, particularly built for students as well, just to, yeah, put that out there. I think they're great, great people to see.
Thank you.
Any other questions, guys? Gotta be something that pops in mind. Do you want me to ask ChatGPT to come up with questions based off the presentation?
You guys all have question forms in front of you too that you can go off of things that they were not answered. If they're-
I presume there's, since a lot of it seems to be programming and stuff, I'm presuming, there's quite a bit of working from home. Since, it seems like remote work is very viable.
I would say it is the most common, like it's actually, it's uncommon to see an AI developer engineer like in a team in a traditional office setting. Like for example, this morning, OpenAI, who's like the 88%, the giants, right? They just opened up their first office. And it's in Japan, where none of their CEOs or CFOs or anybody lives. So yeah, it's definitely a very good work from home opportunity.
Kind of something personally trying to tackle is how much of my time should I be, or daily or weekly, should I be investing in like these courses or education on AI?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I say it really depends upon your workload, what you have going on. For like, I'll tell you my approach to it and see if that helps. So my approach to it was I tried to blaze through there as fast as humanly possible for the courses. So like I did like 6-month courses in a matter of like 48 hours. Like I just started as quick as humanly possible. Because my perspective was I was making up for lost time because I didn't have a computer science degree. I didn't have programming background or programming skills when I first started. So I was like, okay, I'm at a disadvantage compared to other people that are in the field. And I need to radically improve my education. So that's why I burnt them at that rate. I would say that isn't sustainable forever. So I would start with radically going after one or two that you really are interested in and really can devote yourself to. And then I think after you have a foundation of knowledge, then you can continue to have, like we call it, like continued education credits. So you can continue to educate yourself at a slower pace that's more sustainable for yourself. So maybe you guys have summer coming up. So maybe your goal is, okay, the first, I'm going to go after a course every month for this summer, right? I'm gonna get 3 courses for the summer, which would be a pretty crazy, pretty big goal, right? And that would put you definitely top 1% in terms of AI knowledge compared to all your peers, right? Then once you have your foundation, say, okay, now I'm actually going to change the frequency and the duration of this, and I'm going to go from 1 a month to 1 every 3 months. So I'm going to pull back quite a bit because now school's starting up. I have more responsibilities on my plate. So that might be how I approach it, is when you have time available, attack it. When there tends to be a lot of stuff on your plate, pull back a little bit and be more sustainable. Yeah, because the main thing too, if you guys think about is, it also depends on where you're at in your phase and where you want to get after. Like for me, I have previous businesses. I'd already been an entrepreneur. I was looking to take something to market ASAP. So I didn't have the benefit of like, hey, for example, say that I'm a junior in school. I still have 2 years in school before I even think about, or not even think about, before I go to college, right? And then I have another 4 years at college and whatever else. So I think your timeline definitely depends on what your situation is like. For me, I was like, hey, I would love to put out an app like today. So I jumped into it as fast as I could.
What are some skills that are needed to go into a career within AI? What are some skills in high school, things that they can start doing other than like, the research and things to it, communication, whatever. Skills like that are needed.
Yeah, there's hard skills and there's soft skills. So I would say soft skills are, for the difference between hard skills, soft skills are typically things that are taught in like courses and programs. Soft skills are typically things that are learned through like experience and through observation. So I would say a soft skill would be how to manage client relationships. And the best one for that is communication. There's a few things that communication, so broad, so broad. So like if I had to get it more specific in terms of for AI, when it comes to communication, I would be focused on being able to take technical jargon and just like GPT, take technical jargon and boil it down to a language that everybody can understand. I think that's one of the biggest soft skills for people in the AI space. So I think that, and I was really guilty of this when I first started. I would only talk in words that were like 15 letters or more. And I quickly found that people did not want to talk to me very much. Shocker, I know, right? And yeah, nobody wants to learn about three transformables. And so then I was like, okay, if I can take this high level information and I can boil it down to something where I'm talking to a CEO and this CEO has no AI education whatsoever, can I still communicate my concept to him in a way that makes sense? So that's a soft skill that I'd really recommend. A hard skill that I'd recommend would be programming. And this is a hot take because some people are saying that programming is no longer necessary for AI. I actually, depending on the context of what it is you're doing, I agree or disagree. I think that programming is becoming less and less important over the next few years as we have more coding assistants that are able to do it for us, etc. I still think that learning the framework for how certain languages exist and how they, like their methodologies, I think are still really beneficial. So I wouldn't dive into programming, but I would make sure that it's a hard skill that I at least have like a foundational understanding of, and I'd be able to hold my own when talking to people about it. Particularly if you're somebody who's in the development space, that's really important. If you're somebody who's an engineer, slightly less important, but the developers themselves, most definitely having programming experience is a plus. And I would say another soft skill that would be really helpful would be, this is not really crazy, but putting yourself out there in networking opportunities. I think that like one of the most impactful things that I've ever done is
being social. Would be
being social, but particularly in ways that are uncomfortable. Because I think that like and this is what a big overarching thing, even beyond AI, is like the more that you are uncomfortable with a certain situation, the more that the growth period tends to happen. So we're not saying to be uncomfortable all the time. We're not saying be uncomfortable all the time. We're also not saying be comfortable all the time. Take certain risks that you know are going to lead to your growth. For me, that was networking. It was terrifying for me to go up in front of conferences of hundreds of people and tell them, hey, this is what I do, right? It wasn't comfortable, you can say that. But it was through that period of growth that I recognized, I was like, oh, I actually can communicate and I do have more skills than I previously thought. And that allowed me to take my business to the next level by constantly putting myself in those situations more and more. Now, I could keep going on about hard skills, soft skills for that.
I was just curious. So as you mentioned earlier before your whole company, you're a professional athlete, right? Yeah. So do you ever like want to take some aspects of AI to your athletics or anything like that?
Oh yeah.
Talk about how you use AI
Oh yeah.
in your job because you still are the fitness director
Mhm.
at an athletic club.
Yep.
How do you use AI in your job?
So, couple things. I think that there's a beautiful thing that happens when you combine AI with something that you are knowledgeable or passionate about. I think that you having that specific, like, I'll put it in my perspective. For my specific context, I was a fitness professional for a long period of time. And so I have a lot of context in that field. Now, when I combine that with AI, I was able to create technologies that were better than people who don't have that experience. Because there's a lot of AI fitness things out there that were not built by people who are in the industry, and therefore they lack on certain things, you know? So I think that me having that specific like industry knowledge was really important. And I've built a lot of things for fitness in AI. Like I built like AI personal trainers, AI nutritionists, actually built like I call it the AI fitness is the name of the app. And essentially it's like a multi-agent chatbot that calls upon all the different disciplines of fitness into one place. So I essentially tried to combine like all the fitness professions into one, which was really fun. And yeah, so the way that I use it still in my day-to-day operations, and again, I'm just gonna give you guys the secret sauce over here. I built an AI version of myself in my job. Kid you not, call it AJ's AI, swear to God, call it AJ's AI. And the way that I use it is I don't rely on it for everything I do in my job, but I have it improve everything I do. Like, for example, one of our things last year was we were really trying to focus on increasing sales and client burn rate for all of the training departments, right? So I proposed a strategy in place, and the strategy was what I thought of because that's my context. So without using any AI, I was like, what are my thoughts on how to, implement a certain strategy? Then I gave it to AI and I said something along the lines of take this and turn it to 10. Like this is out of 1, turn it to a 10. Give me all of the technical background behind it. Please put this into like executive summary and documentation. Make sure that there are statistical analysis and SWOT analysis in here. So I took what was my essential, like my contextual knowledge of the industry and then fed it into my AI, and my AI was able to take something that allowed us to go from, we were making hundreds of percents of jumps to we were making now like over the span of 6 months, we jumped up like 12,000% revenue, which is unheard of. Yeah. So that's one way that I use it in fitness. I created consumer-based products, and then I also created internal bots for Athletic Club, and now their management uses it to help them augment. Yeah, it's a good question.
So, earlier we talked about like the tools you need to have to like get into like an AI field, but like how does one really go about like getting into AI? Because obviously like doing your own thing and like building your own models is a lot different than like going to like an actual job, working like a 9 to 5. How do you like transition between doing your own thing and actually like making this a full-time job?
Yeah.
With the jobs that are, what are, jobs that are available, because you have the entrepreneur side of that,
Yeah.
but what, in terms of going and getting a job, what are the jobs out there that are available?
Yeah, there are so many jobs out there available. It's
And how do you
ridiculous.
go
It's
about
ridiculous.
getting those?
So I would say the beautiful thing about where the job market is at right now is that you don't have to be highly specialized in order to get a position. So like if I wanted to take my passion for AI, turn it into employment, like W-2 employment, then I would go after getting degrees and third-party certifications. And typically, I would say that most of the applicants that we're seeing are bachelor degrees that have some additional third-party, and that's pretty typical for stuff in the tech field. Sometimes we'll see people with masters, whatever else. Now, taking that and applying to jobs, I use AI to do the resume and cover letter and everything, of course. And apply to as many jobs as you possibly can. The best place is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the #1 platform for the tech community in terms of applying and hiring people. Now, once you have that W-2 job and you're building industry experience and you're also making income, if you then want to get into entrepreneurship at that point, is that the question?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, okay. So we're taking your W-2 job is gaining experience, it's gaining contextual information is what it's doing. It's allowing you to be an expert on this field. And you're going to learn while you're a worker. You're going to learn from somebody who has a larger corporation who's already made those mistakes that you should not do yourself, right? So at that job, I would go as high up on the food chain as possible. And I would say, hey, I am looking for ways to improve my leadership quality, looking for ways to improve my savvy with entrepreneurship, however it is that you would like to word it, and essentially learn from that company's history. When it's time for you to create your own thing, like your own mark on it, then I would say start by first having it as a side hustle, passive income type of deal. And then the point of no return is where that side income makes more than your traditional job. And that's when I recommend going into a full-time. Yeah, I would say that like there's a lot of risk to be had in entrepreneurship, and majority, like 90+% of businesses fail. So understanding that statistic, I am somebody who's in favor of job security while building your own like entrepreneur, like your business. And the time to jump is where that income threshold passes what you're able to do, or you get to leverage your time to a point that's greater than what you can do for a job. For example, like if you could do 50% of your annual salary, but it only took you 20 days to create it, that's a pretty positive indicator that, yeah, that's the job you should be in. But I think that getting first into the industry as a worker also allows you to leverage your networking connections with people, which is really important when it comes later on when you're trying to find clients or people to partner with. And it also gives you a leg to stand on to say, for example, hey, I was previously at IBM under MLM, and now I was there for 6 years, and I'm starting this new business. I have this industry knowledge and this contextual information, plus I have the entrepreneurial spirit, and that will take further. Long-winded answer for your question.
That's a big,
I'd also look at, the job requirements and stuff on job posting and on Indeed, on LinkedIn, anything that you just type in artificial intelligence, see what comes up and kind of read what are the qualifications that these jobs are looking for in terms of experience, in terms of any types of certifications. There might be ones that require degrees, there might be ones that don't require degrees. And that's a good way to be like, okay, well, this looks like a job that I might want and that when I get out of school, and what can I kind of start looking at now and kind of planning out my future and path of wanting to do that.
And I would say internships are a great way to do that too, because they're at no risk to you and you just get to learn, right?
yeah.
And I would say like typically, especially at the big, like the ABC companies, like the big tech giants, they want to see people that have industry knowledge, that have internships, that have degrees and third-party certifications.
Look at this. So this is one just as a technical program manager, grid edge computing at PGE. And so it shows the pay, but then it shows, the type of skills and skill sets that these jobs are looking for. So consulting, decision-making skills, enterprise business, negotiation, organization, and prioritization skills, team building, written and oral communication skills. So those are kind of more of the hard and soft skills that these jobs are looking for, and things that you can kind of work on and look towards in terms of that.
If I had to break it down on there too, into like hard and soft skills, like what I would actually go for in terms of this particular job right here, I would say that.
Well, these are things that the job is looking for all of them. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, and so the place where you would gain that knowledge from each of them would be things like negotiation or enterprise awareness or consulting are typically things that are taught in the programs. The things that like written oral communication, team building, those are typically soft skills that you learn through your experience.
So that's just one example to kind of look at and show that you guys, the jobs that are out there, if they get that.
You should put one up too for like AI developer and engineers.
Actually, what you did, can I add on to my question?
Yes.
So like, of course, that was a great answer, but for like students like us, high schoolers who like have somewhat experience coding with AI, and we want to like get these experiences because of course there's like a lot of requirements containing like prior experience.
Yes.
How do you think students our age who don't have a degree, who don't have like extensive experience with AI, how do you think we can get into these opportunities or we can get into like these jobs, etc.?
I think actually what you guys are doing with AIR is a phenomenal example. Like where you are, of course, you are creating an organization that is quite literally demonstrating your entrepreneurial spirit. I think that whether AIR is successful over the long term or not, whether it is not, we're hoping all of it is, right?
Okay.
But no, 100%. But even if it's not, say that it's an absolute failure, which is worst case scenario. That is still going to be a positive indicator to somebody in the job force because they're saying, hey, this person was willing to create an organization by themselves. And this is what their organization was about. That shows like the go get it attitude that I think all these job employers are looking for. Because if I had to like, and I have this conversation with people a lot, which is if I had to boil down the success in AI into one trait, like one single trait, it would be agility. Being able to be agile to what's happening, what's the latest trends, what's working, what's not working. I think is something that is monumental in AI. And you could say, for example, hey, I was agile. This industry was booming at the time. Hopefully it still is, but say this industry was booming. And I decided that I was going to go after leadership skills and qualities and lead an organization in my local community. I think that's a great place to go. I also think that getting involved with the local community is better as a good starting point. Because one thing to keep in mind too is that there are other people that are local to the city or local to the state that are also wanting to do similar things. And I think that the more that you can network with those people, the more that as you get more connected, that will only help when it comes time to find employment or to build your own. Yeah, like there's a common example. Do you guys know Y Combinator? Does it ring a bell? They're the #1 startup accelerator. This is on outside of AI. This is entrepreneurship. Okay. So they're the #1 startup accelerator in the world out of Silicon Valley, right? If I had to name the people that were in Y Combinator starting class, is Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Greg Brockman, Jeff Bezos. Like it is surreal. I highly suggest you guys look into Y Combinator in the early 2000s. Yeah, Y Combinator. They still run today. They're called, it's a Startup Accelerator Apex is what the name of their industry is. And you can go back to like see interviews, early days Y Combinator, and you see all these people working at the same place and time who are now wildly successful on their own. Gives me goosebumps. Wildly successful on their own, but they leverage people who are wanting to do similar things in their similar location and then built from there.
So I found one, this is a senior system software engineer
For NVIDIA.
for NVIDIA in Hillsborough, and it says right here, the pan that it says no degree required. And so if we scroll down, there's, kind of gives the job description for what it is. And then it'll give us, talks a little bit more about AI. So just reading these types of things can give you that. And then what you'll be doing. So it gives you kind of like an outlook of what the job entails. Let you guys. And then what we need to see, so it does say it doesn't require a degree in applicants, because of experience and things, but then it does say, master's or PhD in computer science or engineering, 6 years of research or industry. So just things like that you can also, with a system software developer engineer, which are going to be in the artificial intelligence space.
Yeah, and one thing to go even further on that, Henry, you could do, I think if we go up a little bit this, the bottom 4 bullet points, you could do without a degree.
Yeah.
These are things that you could be doing right now. Like right now, you're building research and industry experience. You'll have a record of innovating and it'll only continue to improve. Have experience in developing complex software solutions to as much as you can within your fiscal means, right? And then track record of scaling of software. That would be getting more users onto your platform, for example.
And then there's ones too, they also, list ways to stand out. So deep understanding of the technology, strong collaborative and interpersonal skills, specifically a proven ability to effectively guide and influence within a dynamic matrix environment. So a good way to kind of get the experience and look into things are just looking at job postings and seeing, what are the requirements as, AI is ever so developing, looking at, the type of job requirements and things like that, and experience that you can get into.
I was actually gonna see if I could ask them something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, kind of on the same boat of wanting to get into on the entrepreneurial side of AI. I just want to ask, like, what is your company like?
Yeah, shout it out.
You want to run it or?
Sure. So it's basically as of in the current state with AI and the comments on AI and social media, teachers in the education system, they have a bad impression on what about AI in education system, right? So we want to take that misconception away and use it to better the education system itself. So what we are trying to do is we are just reaching out to teachers and we take the lesson plans or the district mandated lesson plan. We integrate a part of some AI lessons in there. So that students get exposure to what AI is, especially elementary students. Because at high school, instead of using AI to cheat, if we teach elementary students that AI is good and how to use it with healthy habits, so it integrates in them that this is the right way to use AI. So this is just what we do. That's a small group.
Yeah,
That's sick. How far have you taken it so far? It's in the building stage?
We've worked with a handful of teachers, and at this point, we're looking more towards the district. We have a lot of teachers at Sunset, which is where we go, on board with our project, and they are really passionate about it like we are. And we're hoping that hopefully by summer, we can be working with the district, because Beaverton School District right now, they are writing a AI handbook, pretty much that they want to release by September when the new school year starts. basically encouraging teachers to use AI and also like kind of at the same time telling them the limits of AI. And we were hoping that we could jump on board with that, help them give the student opinion on it. So yeah, that's what we're at pretty much right
That's really cool.
now. Of course.
I think one thing important for all of you guys as well too, that are looking to take that next step in there is I think everybody underestimates how much you can leverage being a high school student and working with AI. Like I think that, for example, if I had to like work through this role, let's say that you wanted to go after NVIDIA as a software engineer, and we know that, okay, that's X amount of years out in advance, right? You could call up the hiring manager and you could say, hey, I'm actually a local student and I'm in high school and I'm really interested in AI and I would just love to learn anything that I can about the interview process or how you're looking at applicants.
Or ask them for a job shadow.
Yeah.
You can call Intel's harder, I will say Intel in terms of doing job shadows and things, but any, companies that you can find that have an AI department or, a computer softwaring department and you can email or say, hey, I'm a high school student in the area. I'd love to job shadow for a day. What opportunities do you have available for that? Those are really good ways to kind of get that experience as well.
Yeah, and people love to help the high school students as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, they love to. Because it's the one thing that as you get like more and more advanced, the one thing you want to do is like give opportunities to people, right? So I think the sky's the limit in terms of like how, like the doors that you guys can knock on just with that being your pitch,
Do we have any last questions? Anybody on the chat, if you have any last questions, go ahead and put them in. And then once we wrap this up, you're always welcome to stay in if anybody has additional things they want to talk about again.
So thank you guys for coming. This was